What's up, guys? I hope you are having a great day. We are doing another tier list today. This time we are doing 5-color commanders. I went through EDHRec and grabbed the top 30 commanders with a couple exceptions. I'll get into that later. Also, not including partner pairs or backgrounds or whatever. I think there are ways to get 5 colors in that. Did not include that. This is in correlation to our most recent Commander gameplay game. We all played 5 colors. That came out on Friday. Go check that game out if you haven't. And then this upcoming Friday, we have the after show where we will talk a little bit more about our decks and the games. But I thought it'd be fun to go ahead and do another tier list talking about just 5-color commanders in general. So I'm going to do a little clarification system on the ranking here because I didn't necessarily like how I had laid it out when I did a tier list last time when I did Voltron commanders, but you should check that video out as well. So S, I'm going to say, is a commander that I think is cool, and I very likely would build it, or I have built it. A is going to be, I think it's cool, and I could see myself building it, but I'm kind of on the fence. B is going to be, I don't necessarily think it's cool, but I could maybe see myself building it. C is going to be, I'm not really interested in it. I don't see myself building it at all. And then D is going to be cards that I think are actually bad. And yeah, so that's how we're going to go about it today. I'm going to go through these in order of popularity on EDHRec. So the number 1 5-color commander, according to EDHRec, is the WUBRG. This is the deck that Jason played on the most recent episode of our Commander gameplay. So this is for 4 and WUBRG. It's a 10/10 dragon avatar with eminence. So as long as it is in the command zone or on the battlefield, other dragon spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. It has flying, and whenever 1 or more dragons you control attacks, draw that many cards, then you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. So I am not a big fan of eminence. I think it was a mistake. It's really strong. Even like the weakest eminence commander is still pretty decent. But they're all tribal commanders, and people love tribes. People love tribal decks, and there's more than a couple dragon commanders on this list just because dragons are iconic. They're big and beefy, and the fact that WUBRG also makes those big beefy dragons cost less, even when it's just sitting in the command zone, is pretty impressive. I did used to have a WUBRG deck, and I've thought about rebuilding it, but I'm kind of on the fence about it just because I have other dragon decks that I kind of like more, but the ability to play any dragon you want is pretty neat. So I'm going to put WUBRG in the A, even though I don't like eminence. Eminence is almost enough to bring it down a bit, but WUBRG is pretty dang cool. Next up is Kenrith the Returned King. So this is a deck that I have. This is the deck that I played on that episode of Upkeep. So for 4 and a white, it's a human noble, 5/5. You can pay, and it has just a bunch of activated abilities. So for red, you can give all creatures trample and haste on a turn. For 1 and a green, put a 1 counter on target creature. For 2 and a white, target player gains 5 life. For 3 and a blue, target player draws a card. And for 4 and a black, put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. So the problem with Kenrith is that it is actually like really a lot of people just use it as the 5-color good stuff commander. As you can see here, it's ranked number 5 overall, but I think there are more interesting ways to use Kenrith. So my Kenrith deck in particular is it's a group hug deck, and I use Kenrith to make deals with my opponent. So that is one example of an interesting way to build Kenrith, but there are other ways. I am hopefully in the future, when we start our Magic Online Commander series, which will start this summer, the one deck I'm going to build is a Kenrith deck, but it's Magus Tribal. This is a great commander for that because it gives you access to all 5 colors, obviously, but a lot of those Maguses you have to wait to use them because they don't have haste. Well, Kenrith can give them haste. Some of them sacrifice themselves to activate their abilities. Kenrith lets you get them back to use them again. But I understand that some people don't like Kenrith just because it's 5-color good stuff. So even though it's kind of an S, I'm going to put it in the A. Next up is Asika, God of the Tree. So for 1 green, it's a god with Vigilance that says tap to add 1 mana of any color, and other legendary creatures you control have Vigilance and tap to add 1 mana of any color. and it is a 1/4. Esika's cool, but no one actually plays Esika. Everyone just plays the backside of it, which is the Prismatic Bridge. So for WUBRG, it's a legendary enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker card. Put that card onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. There are cool ways to build it, because you could do like kind of a chaos build and like just put cards in there that you like, and then just spin the wheel and see what happens. That's, I think, is the cool, fun way to play Prismatic Bridge, but Prismatic Bridge is also a kind of a combo enabler if you build it the right way, and that doesn't seem very fun to me. And this is, to me, more than Kenrith, is just a 5-color good stuff commander, and that just is not very interesting to me. So I am going to put Esika in the B tier. I get it. I see why it's cool, but I don't see myself building it. But if I thought of something really creative, I could see maybe, but I don't know. All right, next up is a pretty new one. This is Goshinte of Life's Origin. So for 3 and a green, it's a 3/4 Shrine. Shrine's actually not a creature type. It's a subtype of enchantment, so that's kind of confusing, but that's important when reading this card. So for WUBRG, you can tap it, return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and when it or another non-token shrine enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 colorless shrine enchantment creature token. So shrines are kind of a jank enchantment sub-theme, but the fact that we have a 5-color shrine commander for it is pretty cool. I'm not interested in it. I don't like shrines. I don't necessarily like enchantment builds, but I'm happy for the people who are happy, you know? I'm glad that this card's existence made so many people happy. So I should put it in the C, because based on my criteria, I said that like I wasn't interested in building it, or you know, and it is kind of a boring design. But you know, it makes so many other people happy. I'll bump it up to B just to be nice. Next up, we have Sisay, Weatherlight Captain. So for 2 and a white, she's a 2/2 human soldier, and she gets +1/+1 for each color among other legendary permanents you control. And you can pay WUBRG, search your library for a legendary permanent card with converted mana cost less than Sisay's power. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So this is really cool. Legendaries matter. It's not just creatures. It could also be enchantments, even lands. And so there are ways to make this really, really cool. The problem with Sisay is that it recently got passed up in what it's trying to do by the next card on the list, which is Joda the Unifier. So for WUBRG, he's a 5/5 human wizard that says legendary creatures you control get +X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. And then it, I don't want to read that giant wall of text, but it basically has Cascade for legendary creatures. So the problem is that Sisay is cool. Sisay was cool, but now it's been completely passed up by Joda. So on a cool, it's cool, but it's not that great. And then Joda, I think, is a different problem, where I like the random aspect of it, but I don't like the 5-color good stuff, and I don't like that it came in and knocked Sisay off of its perch. So Sisay can have B just out of respect, but Joda's going to have to come down here into the C. I don't hate Joda. I like the chaos element of not really ever knowing exactly what you're going to get, but the fact that it's debatably just like the new Legendaries Matter commander, and it just kind of passes Sisay up like that, kind of rubs me the wrong way. And so does this next card. This is Najila the Blade Blossom for 2 and a red, 3/2 human warrior. Whenever a warrior attacks, you may have its controller create a 1/1 white warrior creature token that's tapped and attacking. And then for WUBRG, untap all attacking creatures. They gain trample, lifelink, and haste until end of turn. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. Activate this ability only during combat. So obviously that's a very powerful ability, but this is kind of what I don't like about 5-color commander design. The right way to play this is warrior tribal, but that's not, I mean, it could just go in any 5-color deck that cares a lot about attacking and combat. One, I don't like 1-color commanders that are technically all colors because of some kind of activated ability. I think that's kind of lazy design in one sense, and then in another sense, it makes them really strong because you can get them out early. It's easier to cast them. You don't have to worry about fixing your mana as perfectly. So I don't like that, but I also don't like that it's like no matter what you do, you just probably will never make a 5-color warrior commander that is better than this, and that is lazy design, and I don't like it. So D tier for me. Next up, we have Morophon the Boundless. So for 7 mana, It's a 6/6 shapeshifter with changeling, so it has every creature type. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Spells of the chosen type you cast cost WUBRG less to cast. This effect reduces only the amount of colored mana you pay, and then other creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. So I actually kind of like Morophon in the sense of it's a placeholder. It's not hopefully going to be a long-term solution to every tribe. I mean, at the rate we're going, we have way too many commander products coming out. We have way too many legendary creatures coming out. And on one hand, that's really annoying. It's hard to keep up. It's hard to make content. It's hard to know what new cards even are. It's hard to, like, if you sit down at a table, there's a good chance that you're just straight up not going to know what's going on. But the plus side of that is that eventually we will probably get a commander for any tribe you could possibly think of. But in the meantime, until we get there, Morophon is actually a great substitute. So I'm going to put Morophon in B. I don't have a tribe that's worth playing it in, but I respect it. I see that, like, some people are going to want it until we eventually do get to the point where any tribe you could think of could use it. So next up is the other Jodah. This is Jodah Archmage Eternal. This is the deck that Steven played on the newest episode of Upkeep. Spoiler alert, it was awesome. So for 1 in Jeskai, it's a 4/3 human wizard with flying. You may pay WUBRG rather than pay the mana cost for spells that you cast. So this is kind of 5-color good stuff, which on one hand I don't necessarily like, but Jodah specifically encourages you to do 5-color good stuff that costs a lot of mana so that you are reducing the mana cost. So kind of just 5-color good stuff, but it does point you in some form of a direction. So, and also it was, I think, Steven's first commander deck, his first real commander deck. And it's, got a lot of love in our play group, and it's always really fun to play against. It has, some really fun games, and I've almost built Jodah a bunch of times, so I'm actually going to put Jodah up in the A. I like it. I've almost built it multiple times, so that's where Jodah is going to go for me. Ramos Dragon Engine is next. So for 6 mana, it's a 4/4 dragon artifact with flying. Whenever you cast a spell, put a 1/1 counter on Ramos for each of that spell's color. Remove 5 +1/+1 counters and add double WUBRG to your mana pool. Activate this ability only once each turn. I'm glad it has that activate only once each turn clause, because otherwise this would be broken. And honestly, Ramos is already really strong. It has kind of that same problem I mentioned with, like, Jagila, and it applies to Kenrith as well, that it's just too easy to cast, especially because it's colorless technically to cast. It's just really easy to get out even earlier, and don't have to worry as much about fixing your mana. But Ramos, to me, is different than a lot of those other cards that fit that criteria, because Ramos is also an artifact. So not only is it liable to creature removal, but now it's also easier to target with artifact removal. So yes, it's strong, obviously, but it's easier to deal with than a lot of the other commanders. And then there's also a lot of very weird ways to go about playing it. So the Ramos deck that I have is a charm tribal. So, Boros Charm, Rakdos Charm, just playing all the charms. And it is so strong and it is so fun. And I have, like, a weak version of it. Like, I like have, like, a budget mana base, and it's still a really fun deck. Tommy is actually playing my version of the deck on episode 10 of Upkeep, which I don't remember exactly what day that's coming out, but so make sure you're subscribed to check that out, because I think it's really cool, really fun. He got to pop off a little bit. So the fact that, yeah, it's really strong, but it is easy to remove, and it's one of my favorite decks, and it encourages some really creative play patterns, I'm going to actually put Ramos up in the S. When I started this tier list, I didn't think that's where he was going to end up, but here we are. Next up, we have another Dragon Commander. This is Tiamat. So for 2 in WUBRG, it's a 7/7 Dragon God with flying. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, search your library for up to 5 Dragon cards not named Tiamat that each have different names. Reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. To me, this is pretty interesting. If you have, like, some kind of dragon combo, obviously really good, but a lot of dragons just have, like, enters the battlefield, do this, and there are going to be situations where that matters, and you're going to need to find it. And I'm not a big fan of tutors in Magic, or specifically Commander, but I get it, and I like having the options, and it's 7 mana. It does require all of the colors, so I think it's relatively fair. It has to resolve, can get blown up by counterspell, so I think the card's fair, but very, very strong. And I'm not interested in building it, but I have mad respect for it. And I think if you had to build 5-color dragons and not do the dragon, this is probably my top pick. So we'll go ahead and put Tiamat in B. Next up is a weird one. This is Cody Vociferous Codex. So for 3 mana, artifact construct 1/4, you can't cast permanent spells, so it's telling you to go Spellslinger. And then for 4, tap it, add WUBRG. When you cast your next spell this turn, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile an instant or sorcery spell with lesser mana value, so kind of Cascade. Until end of turn, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put each other card exiled this way at the bottom of your library in random order. So yeah, it's kind of Cascade, but you don't have to cast it away right away. You can wait and hold it for a later part of the turn. So Cody is, I don't think, very strong, but it does kind of tell you to go Spellslinger route, which to me is pretty cool because there's a couple other decks on here on this list that I think you could go the 5-color or you could go the Spellslinger direction, like Ramos that I just talked about. But Cody is the only one that specifically tells you to go that way. I don't think that Cody's actually all that strong, but it's kind of cool. I'm gonna put it in. I guess I'm gonna put it in B. B's getting kind of stacked here. I maybe I should have been a little more specific. But, we're working with what we got here. Next up, we have Sliver Overlord. So for WUBRG, it's a 7/7 Sliver Mutant, and then you can pay 3, search your library for a Sliver card, reveal that card, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library, and then you can pay 3, gain control of target Sliver. So the one exception I was talking about earlier at the beginning of this video where I was saying that I was going over the top 30, I did not include every Sliver commander. I think the Sliver Overlord is by far the best one, and the other ones are great cards. The other 5-color legendary Slivers are great cards, but I don't necessarily think they're great commanders. So I'm only going to mention the Sliver Overlord as a Sliver commander just to make this list go a little quicker and to hit some other topics. But I think it's pretty dang cool. I think if you're going to build Slivers, this is the way to do it. It's really strong. A lot of Slivers are situational, like dragons can be. So I think that Sliver Overlord reminds me a lot of Tiamat, but I think the Overlord is a better commander to Slivers than what Tiamat is to dragons. And I've been tempted before to build Slivers, so we'll put it up in A. Next, we have Garth One-Eye. So for WUBRG, 5/5 human wizard, that is a big human. Tap it to choose a card name that hasn't been chosen from among Disenchant, Brain Geyser, Terror, Shivan Dragon, Regrowth, and Black Lotus. Create a copy of that card with the chosen name. You may cast the copy. So the way to play Garth is to just get a lot of value. Find ways to abuse that ability, whether it be untap him to do it again, or flicker him so you can do the same ability over and over again. There's a few different ways to do it, so it's definitely cool. I mean, how often do you get to say Black Lotus in Commander? Not very often. This is the only way to do it. But with that said, it's kind of confusing. The power is not all that there. This seems to me like a dirtle fest, and that just doesn't sound like an efficient way to close out games. I'm going to put Garth down here in C. I don't hate Garth, but it seems like probably not very fun to play against. Next up, we have Reaper King. So for I don't know how to explain the WUBRG. It's WUBRG, but for each of those colors, you can pay 2 instead. It's a 6/6 artifact Scarecrow. Other Scarecrow creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever another Scarecrow comes into play under your control, destroy target permanent. So this is Scarecrow Tribal. I don't know how many Scarecrows there actually are in Commander. So, okay, yeah, we look at the high synergy cards here on EDHRec. It's a bunch of shapeshifters with Changeling. Okay, if you're going to go tribal, this is one of the better options you could go with because when a Scarecrow enters the battlefield, destroy a permanent, that's really strong. Tribal seems pretty cool, actually. You know what? I wasn't thinking about this one either, ending up high on the list when I was going into prepping for this list, but I'm going to put that in the A as well. That seems pretty dang cool, pretty interesting. Next up is Niv Mizzet Reborn. So for WUBRG, 6/6 Dragon Avatar with Flying. When he enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each color pair, choose a card that's exactly those colors from among them. Put the chosen cards in your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. There's a lot of ways to do this, but basically 2 colors matter. Niv Mizzet reads really cool. It reads really strong. There's a deck in Pioneer that's kind of built around him. It's actually not that strong. You have to spend so many of your resources being able to abuse that ability to do it over and over again that it just requires a lot of setup. And if you're trying to do like that style, you might as well just play Ramo. So I'm going to go ahead and Niv-Miz, it's cool, but it's not for me. We're going to put it in the B tier. Next up is Child of Alara. So for WUBRG, 6/6 Avatar with Trample. When it dies, destroy all non-land permanents. They can't be regenerated. So the funny way to build Child of Alara is to stall until you get a combo that can win you the game, and then it's just board wipe tribal. So you just get Child of Alara out and just constantly find ways to blow things up so that none of your opponents can ever have anything more than lands. That is funny, but you shouldn't do it. So I want to put Child of Alara, I kind of want to put it in B, because I could maybe I would do it just as a meme once, but it would be on those, again, where over the summer we're going to have a Magic Online Commander gameplay series, and I could maybe build it for like one game to use there, but otherwise, okay, it's going in the C. You shouldn't do it, just based on morality. All right, next up we have Tazri, Beacon of Unity. So for 4 and a white, Human Warrior, that's a 4/6. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party, and then you can pay blue, black, red, green, or 2 of each of those the same way that we had with Reaper King. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, Wizard, and or Ally cards from among them. Put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So the problem with Tazri is that's very specific. You can overlap you can have cards that are rogues and wizards or clerics, and you can do it like that. Ally specifically is really easy to do that with. But otherwise, I think this is kind of going the same way as the Reaper King, where you probably play a bunch of changelings. Let's look at the high synergy cards, or do we have a lot of that? Oh, no, we actually have a decent amount of cards that actually would fall in the category. The fact that it only digs 6 deep, though, means that you're actually probably pretty likely to whiff on this. So 4 mana, maybe get 2 cards in your hand. Doesn't sound that great. 4 mana, draw 2, if you think about it like that. But you know what cards you're going to get. That just doesn't sound very good, and it has a high whiff possibility because you're going to have lands in your deck, you're going to have support pieces in your deck, you're going to have removal in your deck. So I don't actually think Tazri is that good. I don't think Tazri is all that interesting. We're going to go ahead and put her in C. I respect it. Like, if you're going to build it, prove me wrong. Show me it's actually strong. I just don't think you can do it. I was going to go in order, but I am going to jump ahead because we're going to talk about the other Tazri. This is General Tazri, so for 4 and a white, 3/4 human ally. When she enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an ally creature card, reveal it, and put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. Then you may pay WUBRG. Ally creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of colors among those creatures. This is slightly better than a lot of those other problematic commanders I was talking about on this list, where it's just an activated ability, but it's actually only 1 color. This actually is okay with me because it's not very strong, but it actually does give allies a pretty decent commander. Allies is a creature type as well as some of the other ones we've talked about, like Slivers and Dragons, where they do have a lot of very specific abilities, so going to find the specific one you need is pretty good, and then it's an enter the battlefield effect, so you can flicker it or whatever. This is the deck that Preston played on the newest episode of Upkeep, and towards the end of the game, he did pop off quite a bit. He did do pretty well. So I think that General Tazri is a B. I'm not interested in playing it, but I do like it. All right, we will go back in order now. So the next card is another dragon, a lot of dragons. So Scion of the Dragon for WUBRG is a 4/4 dragon avatar with flying, and then you can pay 2, search your library for a dragon permanent card, put it in your graveyard. If you do, it becomes a copy of that card until end of turn, then shuffle your library. This is pretty interesting because you can go get those specific effects like I was talking about with dragons. And then it gets even stronger if you have a lot of recursion, if you have a lot of ways to get cards back from your graveyard, back onto the battlefield, or back in your hand, or something like that, so that you can recast them again later. Really prone to blowout, but it seems really interesting. So I'm going to put Scion in B as well. Wow, the B tier is getting really stacked. I don't think it's that good as a dragon commander, but it seems really fun. It seems really interesting. Next up is Corona False God. So for 1 in WUBRG, I should have looked up the Oracle text on this. I don't know what this is. It's a 5/5 with haste. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player untaps Corona, and gains control of it. Whenever it attacks, creatures of the type of your choice get +3/+3 until end of turn. This is chaos at its finest. This is really, really fun, but it is really easy to deal with. It's actually not that strong. It reminds me a lot of, there were, I think, 3 commanders I talked about in the last tier video for Voltron, where they were kind of moving around the table and doing other things. But Corona's kind of probably the worst of them, because it quite easily could end up benefiting your opponents, especially if they're playing tribal. But even if they're not playing tribal, this has a really good opportunity to just really backfire on you. It is pretty cool. I didn't know this card existed. I want to put it in the B tier because it's kind of cool, but it's actually bad. We're going to put it in the C tier. Next up is maybe the newest card on this list. This is Jared Carthelion. It's a WUBRG 5 loyalty Planeswalker. This was the head of one of the new commander decks from Dominaria United. So it has an +1 to create a 3/3 Kavu creature token with trample. That's all colors. -3. Choose up to 2 target creatures for each of them. Put a number of 1/1 counters on it equal to the number of colors it is. And then -6. Return target multicolored card from your graveyard to your hand. If that card was all colors, draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. 5 color matters is kind of interesting. It's something that we haven't really seen before, but this precon is one of the better ways you could build it. Obviously, there are good upgrades for it, but it's kind of dumb. I'm going to put it in the C tier. Sorry, Jared, you have an awesome beard. You have a cool sword, but nah, dude, I think this is Dirtle Central. I think this is a good way to draw out games without any really good win cons. Next up is Horde of Notion. So for WUBRG 5/5 Elemental with Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, you can pay WUBRG to put a target Elemental card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. So this is a good commander for elementals specifically. This would be really interesting if you were like either doing self-mill, then you could get elementals back that way. But I think the better way to do it is just have it hang out in the command zone, and then if you lose one of your really important ones like Shivan Reef or something, then Shivan Reef, that's not the name of the card. What am I thinking of? Risen Reef. That's the card I was thinking of. Yeah, that card. That's a really important card in Elemental's deck. So yeah, if you lose that, this is a way to get it back. Obviously, it's a lot of mana, but it's repeatable, and you would always have access to it. Is this necessarily the best Elementals commander? Maybe not, but it is pretty cool. If I were to build Elementals, it's the commander I would use. And Elementals are a pretty neat tribe, so I'm actually going to put that in A. Something else that I like about it that I don't think gets brought up enough is that you can have this as your commander, but your deck's not reliant on your commander. I really don't like decks that if your commander's not in play, your deck does nothing, because that means that, you're going to get teamed up on, right? Because if people know that your deck doesn't work without your commander, they're just going to keep removing it, and you're eventually just going to get locked out of the game because of commander tax. So decks that like they can kind of function without their commander, but their commander just helps a specific situation, I really like that. I think we should go in that route more often. Next up is Progenitus. I saw this on the internet back in the early days of me getting into Magic, and I thought this was fake. I thought this was just something that someone made as a joke, but it's double WUBRG, Hydra Avatar, that's a 10/10, protection from everything. If it would be put into your graveyard from anywhere, reveal it and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. This is terrible. It's not a good card. I see it. I see it being fun. So just because it's slightly fun, I'll bump it up into C. But my God, what a dumb card. Jengatha the Wellspring for 4 and then Gruul. It's a 5/5 elemental elk that has companion. No cards in your starting deck have more than one of the same mana symbol in its mana cost. And then you can tap it to add WUBRG. This mana can't be spent to pay generic mana costs. So I think that Jengatha isn't the most interesting commander, but I think it actually goes well into a lot of the cards we are talking about today, like in the 99, maybe as a companion, but probably not necessarily. It really enables a lot of the activated abilities on a lot of the other commanders. So as a commander, I'm not interested at all. But if we were talking about being an enabler, I think it's sweet, but I don't think it's actually a very good commander, so I guess we'll put it in C. Someone prove me wrong, actually. If someone has a good Jingantha deck with it as the commander, drop it in the comments. I would like to see it, because I'm thinking about it more. Maybe there is a way to make that really cool, but until I'm proven, that would be enough for me to bump it up into B, but I want to wait till someone proves it to me, so we're going to leave it in C for now. We are finally almost done. I am losing my voice. This is Kyode, Soul of Kamigawa for 4 and a white, Dragon Spirit 3/3 with flash and flying. When it enters the battlefield, another target permanent gains indestructible for as long as you control Kyode, and then for WUBRG, it gets +5/+5 until end of turn. This seems really interesting. I think if you're have an important combo piece, Kyode is a really good way to protect it. So I think maybe that's the way to do it. Maybe if you have a 5-color combo deck and Kyode is in your command zone just to protect the combo piece, that's probably the best way to do it, because also it's pretty easy to leave only one specific colored pip up and then the rest as whatever mana, and keep in mind has flash. So I think if you have a combo deck, I think this is actually pretty cool. And I do occasionally build combo decks, and I could see it being in the command zone as a protection piece. I'd rather my commander be part of the combo, like if you have a Brea deck or something, but go ahead and put it in A. If I was going to build a 5-color combo deck, Kyode might be the right way to go about it, just to have a little bit of extra protection. Next up, we have Okagachi. So for 1 WUBRG, Dragon Spirit 6/6 with flying and trample, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, if that player attacks you during their last turn, exile target non-land permanent that player controls. This is pretty situational. This card came in the Dragon Precon back in the day, and even then I didn't really like the card. I mean, a 6/6 with flying and trample is, nothing to scoff at for 6 mana, but it is hard to cast. Its ability relies on someone attacking you. So I think best case scenario, people, especially if it's in your command zone, I think best case scenario, it's deterring other players from attacking you because they don't want their stuff to go bye-bye. So a deterrent, cool, but I'm not for that. I don't like cards that prolong the game. I'm actually going to put this in the D tier, just because I don't like that it prolongs the game. Next up, we have Jensen Carthelian Druid Exile. So for green and a white, it's a 2/2 human druid. Whenever you cast a multicolored spell, scry 1. If that spell was all colors, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. You can pay 5, tap it to add WUBRG. So that actually is okay. I kind of like that activate ability, because it's not that Jensen's a mana dork, but if you have a lot of lands, but you don't have the specific lands you need, it can help you fix. I think that if you're going to do 5-color tribal, Jensen's a lot more interesting than Jared, and they were in the same precon. So where did I put Jared? I put Jared in the C. We got to go above that, so I guess B. We got 2 more to go. Next one we have is Chromat. So for WUBRG, it's a 5/5. Again, should have looked up the Oracle text so I could see what the creature type is, but it has a bunch of activated abilities. So for white and a black, you can destroy target creature blocking or blocked by Chromat. For blue and a red, it gains flying until end of turn. For black and a green, you can regenerate it. For red and a white, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And then for green and a blue, you can put it on top of its owner's library. So that's actually pretty helpful if you need to protect it or something. So I'm kind of surprised I hadn't ever heard of this card until making this list. I mean, it is really low on the list. Not a lot of people are playing this card, but to me, this just seems really cool. I think this would be best as a Voltron build. So you're just going to buff up Chromat and try to get in for commander damage. And I like that it has all of these interesting abilities. I actually really like this card. I'm gonna give it an A. I don't care. I like getting to build decks that are a little less popular. I know that's maybe surprising because I have a reputation at this point with our commander series upkeep that I tend to play a lot of just everyone knows that's a good commander kind of cards. But every now and then, I like to build a deck that no one's even heard of the commander, especially when it's an old card like that. Probably not going to build it in paper, but when we do that Magic Online series, maybe I give that one a go. Finally, the last one. This is Atog. This is for WUBRG. It's a 5/5. Sacrifice an Atog, and it gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the sacrifice Atog's power. Does anyone remember ATOGs. There are some really powerful ATOGs in Magic history back in Constructed, but in Commander, they don't really make a splash. It's not a creature type we see very often. I mean, here we go. Here are the high synergy ATOGs. There's just not a lot of them. This is like, you would have to kind of go like, here, look, Mirror Entity is saying right here. You would almost have to go the Changeling route again, and that just doesn't seem very interesting. No, not for me. Someone's gonna like it, so I don't know. Where do I put it? C or D? We'll put it here. I guess that's where we're going to call it for this tier list. It looks good enough to me. That was a long one. That was that was a lot. Next tier list, I'm hoping is not going to be so long. I know what the next tier list is going to be, is coming out next Tuesday, but I don't know how many cards it is. So that will be interesting, and make sure you subscribe so you can come check that out when it comes out. This is not every 5-color commander that exists, so if there is another one that you have or like or have thought about building, let me know in the comments down below. Again, this is just my personal preference, and I hope my reasoning at least makes sense to you. Even if you don't agree, you can be like, yeah, I see how he came to that conclusion, and I will see you guys next time.